So I think this case study and the responses are really great because they're bringing out lots of levels to this and the complexity, and that it's not about, well, let's swap these responses for the textbook ones and then we'll all go away after, and we'll all carry out the new recipes. Because if we all did that, divorce wouldn't exist in life, and bust up with our children wouldn't exist, and all these things. But I think emotional intelligence is hugely about appraising yourself afterwards and seeking forgiveness.
Because you've spoken before about being flawed. You're a flawed human being. I'm a flawed human being. None of us are perfect. We're human beings. And if we expect us to be, if we expect our emotional intelligence to be something that we can, bring forward perfectly every time in every occasion, then we're just replicating a robot, really, aren't we? That's not what a feeling fluid human being is about.
No.
Yeah. I mean, another response, I've got a few responses here. So another response I've heard to that, the manager says, everyone else is in the same boat. We're all stressed and busy. Don't take what they say so personally. You need to be more resilient in this sort of work.
Yeah, this is the toughen up one, isn't it? If only you were more tougher. Or if not saying that, just expecting resilience as well. That goes with having the job. You've got to be resilient without really. And it's also perpetuating the lie. It's the lie of, well, everyone else is fine and you somehow have fallen off the edge. And I suppose that goes back into my own personal experience the last 2 years of, well, surely, David, with all you'd spoken and written about person-centred care and emotional labour and emotions at work and well-being, surely you'd been practicing it yourself, and surely that would have stopped you being clinically depressed. And surely when you were depressed, you'd have then known how to get the right help. And it's like, really? Really? Do you not actually think, as you said, that as a flawed human being, that you start your own experience on a clean sheet, no matter how much you might have spoken, written, whatever in life, and that really what we need at the moments of wobble, or even more catastrophic than wobble, isn't someone to say, toughen up, everyone else has cracked it and you haven't, or, somehow this is about you've never developed resilience. I had developed a lot of resilience in my life. I'd been through a lot of death in my life. Father at 8 years, when I was 8 years old, others dying of cardiac failure. I'd come out as a gay man at 26 with all the shame and guilt, and went with that, and having to, see, lots of people develop resilience constantly through their life. It doesn't mean that resilience will always deliver to you in the worst moment that then comes afresh. And what it's about is sitting down with someone and finding out, and I won't even use the word resilience because resilience is loaded with expectation, but I would be wanting to understand, what is it that's tipping them? What is it that's tipping them? What was the straw that broke their back? Not that they aren't, like the metaphor in the straw that brought the camel's back. That they have been a camel and they've had a strong back and have carried many loads in life. But why at the moment is this the final straw? What is it tapped into, both in the now, and what is it tapped into that there was load on the camel that you've been carrying and thought was all right? That's, I suppose, where we talk about emotional intelligence being sophisticated. There's a sophistication in exploring why people wobble. Yeah.
And yeah, that's really important. I know we've all heard the straw that broke the camel's back before, but the way you've just described it then, I've taken that in a different way. It really is important to view it that way, isn't it? I mean, the other thing is, I feel as if we're not in the same boat. None of us are in the same boat. We're all in the same storm. but we're not in the same boat.
Yeah.
We're kind of, we're all different, aren't we? And we've all got our different strengths, our different, weaknesses, things that we're good at, things that we're not so good at and we need help with. And that's why it's important to have those connections, I think. So to expect everybody to be the same as one another, it's ludicrous, I think.
It's something I've been just been writing about the word truth, because I think emotional intelligence is about truth, but of course there isn't one truth. Like you're saying, we all have our own version and aspect and experience of truth. And so if you're going to come in a emotionally intelligent, authentic way to meet someone, you have to meet them from the perspective of what is their truth, not that yours is the absolute one. And that is, for me, the essence of emotional intelligence is about striving to be authentic, striving to be genuine, striving to speak the truth. But to do that, you have to also accept that your authenticity, your genuineness, your truth is not absolute. People might not see those aspects in you as you do, and also they may have other versions of them in themselves. Yeah.
Oh, it's really interesting. The other response is, have you been to see your GP? You look like you've got some anxiety problems.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've been when I heard that one, and I thought the number of people that said that to me when I started to become depressed, and I wanted to just scream, "You're not getting me. You're just not getting me." And I also wanted to scream that being who I was, that responding to me that I needed to go see my GP and have my anxiety problems dealt with, was the back end of the horse. That might well be, and of course it was what I needed. But what I needed before that was for someone to understand the paralyzing shame and guilt I felt at being needy, at feeling desperate, at being lost, and thinking, how did I get here? How can it be like this? And how am I going to step out and tell someone that for all I've been in life, I'm reduced to this? And it was even summed up when I saw a counsellor. And it's all right to laugh, because I could laugh at it now, but I did it with such seriousness. I wonder how many people go for counselling and send the counsellor their CV first. But that's, Lesley, what I did. Because in doing it, what I was saying was, do you understand the enormity of me stepping out the door to even come and see you? Do you understand the loss in this CV of who I am?
Yeah.
And do you realise that I've fallen a very, very long way? And only am I going to trust you as a GP or trust you as a counsellor if you can. I know you'll see the ridiculousness in what I've done in sending it you, because that's not how I'm going to be helped in you reading or grasping all of this about me. But the starting point has to be to know who I've been and who I was and why it really mattered.
Yeah.
And
it's so important.
And what it's taken to get here today.
Yeah.
And yes, I'll begin now with a blank sheet with you in the exploration, but it has to come from a place of, I need some respect for who I've been. Even though I know I've got to learn to rebuild who I've been with who I've also been through this experience of anxiety and depression. Now that is, I suppose, highly complex as a manager, sat in your office, and thinking, well, is this who I am? Is this the skills I've got to have as a manager and leader? And I'm not saying all that, but what I'm saying is just coming out with, have you been to your GP and have you got anxiety problems, is so far off the mark, because there are so many other conversations that person is likely to need and want before they can get to answering those two questions that are vital ones and will in the end become the vital ingredients of restoration, but they're not the place to begin.
Absolutely. And it's so hard to be vulnerable. It's so painful to be experiencing those emotions, for one, and to be able to share them with somebody who understands is hard enough, but to share those emotions and bare yourself to somebody who isn't going to understand and isn't going to have you and be able to contain you and help you, that's disastrous, the thought. So I don't blame you for wanting to sort of preempt that, what that meeting was going to be like with that counsellor. You don't know the counsellor. You don't know how they were going to receive you. You were testing the waters. You don't jump. If you're standing on the edge of a cliff and you want to jump into the water, you want to know that there's not rocks underneath that water that are going to smash you to pieces. You want to know that that water is going to capture you and hold you. And it's the same sort of thing with sharing our emotions.
Yeah, and this person, being asked, have you been to see a GP and have you got anxiety problems? The message I'd hear from that is, I'm pathologizing you. And just as I give out paracetamol for headaches, this is my standard response to someone who's not coping at work. Have you been to your GP and have you got anxiety? And it's like the door is clamping down on you from the very beginning. The response isn't, this is an open workplace. This is a workplace where many of us are vulnerable at times, and we've come through. And this is a place where we can talk about that and where you can trust me. And when we've worked through how you're currently feeling, then we'll talk together about possible steps when you're ready. But we're not going to just dispose of you and put you through the you are sick route and end of bye-bye. It's not also saying as a manager you have to do it all. Of course you haven't. It's not your job at work to solve all of that. But I think an emotionally intelligent organisation would expect a leader to have what I call the nous, to know how to work alongside someone and literally metaphorically holding their hand a number of steps before it gets into, do you need medical help?
Absolutely. It's all those validating statements first, isn't it? It's not viewing you. Sometimes you're talking to someone and you just know that they're viewing you as a problem to be solved. Like they're already thinking, they're not even listening to what you're saying. They're already thinking, right, so what am I going to do here? Shall I refer her to occupational health? Or you can see the cogs turning. Absolutely. It's always important for management, really, for managers to have these skills in emotional intelligence, to be able to help people and to support people. I guess it reminds me of, with somebody with dementia, if somebody comes up with dementia to you and says, oh, can I go home now? And they're in a care home, I need to get home because my children need me because I need to cook their supper. You wouldn't then go, come and have a cup of tea. You wouldn't. Some people do, but the validating, you would want to start validating first, wouldn't you? You would want to meet that person as to where they're at. So, I mean, we keep coming back to meeting the person where they're at, don't we? With all of this.
Absolutely.
It seems like a common theme. So meeting that, validating, saying, oh, are you worried? You seem quite worried about this. And it's those steps. It's not just, let's go and have a cup of tea, because that person doesn't feel listened to. They don't feel heard. The cup of tea might be the final outcome, but we don't leap from that to that, do we?
And you've used a really important point there that leads to our earlier discussion about, are staff going to get what we want them to give? If we're saying we want staff to give people living with dementia validating feeling-based responses that interpret the emotion behind the expression or apparent so-called behaviour. So we're asking staff to be much more intuitive about the meaning behind the words and actions in people living with dementia. And then they don't receive that same intuitive response about their own expressions in a team meeting, in a meeting with a manager. That dichotomy of what we want you to give isn't what you'll receive, is a recipe for complete lack of congruence. And that lack of congruence in the end will cause workplace dissonance. It will cause, huge issues in the whole leadership, in the whole people management response to people. And that organisation will get itself in a real fix in the end.
Nobody responds well to the message, do as I say, not as I do, do they? The last one, the last response from the manager is, I've heard this, well, I'm sorry you're upset, but it really is important that fluid charts are completed and care is delivered in a timely way, or we'll have complaints. I think perhaps you need to work on your time management.
I mean, yeah, that is, that's the far end of the spectrum opposite of everything we've discussed in this conversation. It's saying, I am an automaton and I am seeking you to be an automaton in your work capacity. You are a unit of work and I'm measuring the unit. And, step up as a unit or step out. And you've nowhere to go with that. You've got nowhere to go. If you work in a factory on a conveyor belt, you'd still find that a pretty tough response. But in health and social care, it's such a million mile away that actually we might as well say we're finished. We're actually finished as a sector then, if that's where we are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of putting the organisation ahead of the person, isn't it? And nobody feels good working in an environment where they think that the organisation is far more important to your manager than you are, and your feelings and all of that. So I think we've talked a lot, haven't we? I think we're coming sort of towards the end. I know I could talk to you all day, and I've got, I think, a lot of the questions that I've had to ask you. We've talked about a lot of the questions that we've asked you. But what I really want to get to at the moment is, what would you say to someone who says, look, we're busy enough, we've barely time to provide the basic care and rarely have a full break. We don't have time to add emotional intelligence to our workload as well.
Yeah, and that is being said to me at the moment, because there is enormous dangers in this whole subject of emotional intelligence, that people are feeling not something else that's going to be loaded onto us. David, where have you been the last 2 years? And now you're up there in the clouds putting out all this stuff. Do you really understand what a day has been like? So I hear it, and it's being said to me, and people are also saying, where can we go with all this, David, in relation to inspection and regulation, where they've been the last 2 years, and all the government guidance? And I suppose what I'm trying to say is, I don't want to deny the huge inhuman level of giving that's gone on, and nor do I want to deny the quantity of workload that has been beyond staggering that people have been in. But what I am exploring, seeking, suggesting is that this can't be the ongoing chapter of the health and social care sector. There has to be a way to reverse us back to all the reasons that every health and social care worker came into it for, and every manager and leader that wants to lead to be the best. And to reverse it out or back through the pandemic, we have to re-examine actually that not much in life is achieved that if it lacks emotional intelligence. We're not great parents if we lack emotional intelligence. We're not great partners. We're not a great friend. If a friend rings up at 3 a.m. because their husband's left them, and all you say is, well, it's 3 a.m. and I'm very tired because I have to be at work the next day, and so I'll be in touch later. You would not expect that of a best friend. You'd expect that best friend to be saying, I'm desperate for you. You must be in such a state in the middle of the night. I'll get in the car and come round. You know, that these human responses, some of it isn't emotional intelligence responses we've to learn. Some of it is what's in us and innate in us. And I think we need the word permission.
Yeah.
We need permission for emotional intelligence. We need positivity about our whole life history in order to bring. I've referenced a book that I really, really admire called To Be Met as a Whole Person at Work. And it's by Nathan McCluskey. And isn't that our whole desire, to be met as a whole person, as a parent, friend, child, worker? We want to be met as a whole person. And I think when people are saying we haven't the time for this, you'll pay back in time tenfold if you shut the door on this and get on with feeling that work is now so overwhelming on tasks, so overwhelming on guidance, so overwhelming on regulation. You will drown. You will drown. But the only way to actually start swimming again is to get back, to have the permission about feelings-based care, to have the permission to restore emotional intelligence back in the workforce, to actually implement it in recruitment and retention of staff, to believe that emotional processing is what delivers any one of us the best quality of life. And when we've lost our way on emotional processing, sometimes life becomes, to excuse the phrase, pretty shitty. And there's every one of us have had a moment in life that was pretty shitty, and you thought, I've completely screwed up and lost my way, and will I get back? The answer is you get back when someone with emotional intelligence, and it might be a GP or a counsellor or your best friend or a partner or someone you've always worked with, but when someone reaches out to you again and crosses that divide where you've drowned and says, let's get back to you being you. And in the end, I believe, not just in health and social care, I believe some sectors of work are more highly developed in this than health and social care in terms of emotional intelligence. They believe emotional intelligence is good business. I don't want to sell it on business. I want to sell it on belief and feelings. But if I have to, I'd sell it as well on good business.
I think that's smart, really. I'm wondering if we could end on something that I noticed on your website. You've written a section about me. And in this, you talk through different aspects of yourself, values, life experiences, roles, abilities, traits. Do you think, is that a way that our audience can, is that maybe a starter for them to become more self-aware, to become emotionally intelligent? Could you talk us through that a little bit? Yeah,
it was when I was appointed, as the professor at the university, and I knew I had to do an inaugural lecture, which felt a huge milestone in life. And I sat and thought about, because I didn't recall I'd ever been to a professorial inaugural lecture. So I knew it had to be, somebody used the word scholarly with me. And it was like, okay, so I have to produce some scholarly piece that, in a sense, legitimizes the Vice-Chancellor's, investment and worth of me. But I also thought about, in an emotionally intelligent way, and I thought, I want to start as I mean to go on. I want to be real in this inaugural lecture. And so I wrote first I've renamed it, at the time I called it the About Me. You can get it on my website, emotional-intelligence.care, but I've renamed it the Emotional Intelligence version of me. I wanted people coming to the inaugural lecture, there were a couple of hundred who listened to it online. I wanted them to know this isn't a guy who's just had 40 years of career, which has been rounded off with a professorial appointment, and he's going to give a scholarly lecture. I wanted people to know where it came from, that it came from, still get to say it again, it came from the inside of me. And it came from the person I have tried to be. And so I created this sheet with all these 6 words under all these headings. And as you say, some of the words were like flawed, etc., because I wanted people to see that I've messed up in life as well. And some aspects of life have been really tough. And that I've not lived a gilded life always. You know, I might be standing there as a inaugural professor, but it's not always been gilded. And so I created that document. It was on everybody's chairs in the room, and obviously referred to it in the lecture. And then I put it on the website because I felt that has to be our starting point. If we're going to talk about the future of emotional intelligence, the future of person-centered care, future of recruitment and retention, I think we have to start with the wholeness of us all. And I wanted to create something quite simple, which said, could you create an emotional intelligence version of you to talk at in a team meeting? If you're a manager of a team, as a way of giving permission for other people at work to also share their whole self. Could you actually include it in an interview as the panel to say to applicants, well, this is the whole of us as a panel. We'd like you to share the whole of you. So could you actually, having heard some of our aspects of us as interview panel, how about sharing the things you wouldn't have expected to share about yourself in an interview? I think there are many uses and ways in which we could send out a message to everybody. Like we say about life history of people with dementia, we want to know the whole of you. And we want to know the whole of you in a shift, in a team meeting, in an appraisal, in an interview. Actually, by knowing the whole of you, we hope to bring out the best in you. And that way we know you'll bring out the best in others.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the way you put, giving permission as well. You are, as a leader, you're giving permission to other people to be flawed, to be themselves, to be a person. So I guess it's that leading by example. And I think if you're standing there and you're a professor of a university and you've got this fantastic position and you're influential and you're saying I'm flawed, then I have permission to be flawed and I don't feel the pressure and the stress, and I can now get on with my job without feeling like someone's wielding a big stick and is going to hit me with it as soon as I make a mistake. That if I do happen to, I'm going to be met with compassion. I'm going to be met with somebody who's going to try and understand what's going on for me.
And that the emotional, absolutely. And that the emotional intelligence aspect is in being flawed, or whatever word you've put on this document of 6 words in different headings, that what you're saying, that you're not just saying, and that's it. What I was trying through the inaugural lecture to say was, reading these words about me might help you to understand why I'm giving this inaugural lecture in the way I am, why I broke down at times, as I have in this conversation with you, what that is part of and about in the whole of me, and that it doesn't lessen me, doesn't lessen the contribution I want to give out, but you'll see what I have done or tried to do to emotionally process some of these aspects of my life. So I think the emotional intelligence aspect is not just the words or saying, well, that's me and that's it. It's saying, I am still a person trying to emotionally navigate myself in relation to others and with others and through others. And that's the sort of professor, nurse, care worker, manager I'm going to try to be.
That is brilliant. Thank you so much, David. It's a pleasure to have had you here and to hear what you've had to say. Again, I'm very inspired by you, and I think it's wonderful. Thank you so much for being here today.
And thank you for having the inspiring idea to do this, because I hadn't thought of it, and you came forward saying, what do you, and the way you've also structured it, you've done the opposite, haven't you, of what I talk about when I say things can be too shallow. You went for depth, and all credit to you for going for the depth, because it brought out in me a conversation, even when, in preparation for it, I didn't know was going to bring out. And that's another message to everybody, that tackling things in an emotionally intelligent way will bring out more depth and more reward of the depth than you can ever imagine.